She wipes her cheeks of phantom tears. What's on tonight? It's trauma and fear. Gaze into the black mirror with eyes to see. Could it be clearer? Oh, oh, we hold these truths, you know. Oh, we've got the proof. Oh, you know the thing. Pour yourself some discernment, my friend. Distractions and traumas. One begins before the other ends. Say no, reject the lies. The truth is imperative. That's why we're reframing the narrative.
All right, welcome everyone to this week's episode of Reframing the Narrative. And this week we're inspired by some of the great writing, as usual, by our friend and ally, Agent 131711, who dropped a recent series on the origins of Christmas and its real motivations. This is certainly not intended to be a book report by any means, but definitely inspired us, Jake and I, to think about the holidays and the participation that we're encouraged to have with them, especially with Thanksgiving, and then of course Christmas, i.e. Saturnalia, coming up the following month, and all the indulgence and consumerism that goes along with it. We just thought it would be appropriate timing to talk about that a little bit. And also, it just so happens as we're recording this session today that there's another November tradition going on, and a lot of theater and bread and circuses happening across the U.S. So we thought we might fold that into the discussion as well. But as always, Jake, good to see you. And I know that you've been diving headfirst into that series. Maybe I'll hand it to you to just put some initial thoughts out there.
Well, cool. I'm happy to introduce a few things that our friend Agent dug up. As usual, he's always digging up some facts that are not very widely known. And this one has a lot of interesting names involved in the origin and promotion of Christmas. And they're as famous as Queen Victoria and Charles Dickens. So check it out. It's on Substack, Agent 131711. We get into the origins of the drawings, the caricature of the Saint Nick character. There's some background on the name Saint Nicholas and the origin of Santa Claus's abode in the North Pole. And then it gets into the new territory beyond the introduction of Christmas as a holiday, but getting into some of the more esoteric and maybe occult connections with Christmas to, like you already mentioned it, and spoiler alert, Saturnalia and Saturn worship. And then that connects to Judaism and the symbolism involved in Judaism, and then there's Jewish characters involved in the origins and promotion of Christmas as well. So it reads like a really interesting mystery in a lot of ways. And I've come away just wondering, like, the mystery to me is like, so how is this related to Jesus's birth? Why is it called Christmas at all and not just like St. Nick's Day or something like that, just or something, mistletoe day, whatever. And just, that's really the question that I'm kind of left with. Like, how does this tie in? And of course, we know December 25th it's 3 days after the winter solstice. It's when the sun is reborn, because the sun will change by 1 degree on the horizon every day of the year, except for the times of solstice, the winter and summer solstices, where it kind of looks like it's hanging out on the horizon and it's dead for 3 days because its lowest point remains at the same spot on the horizon. And so in the sense of the sun kind of reviving from its lowest point on the winter solstice, it is dead for 3 days. And so you do see in many, many ancient traditions the rebirth or the birth of the main character, the hero and the god, including gods like Mithra, Horus, on December 25th, or 3 days after the winter solstice. There's many. I could probably name quite a few, but you can look it up. So anyway, it got us thinking, what do the holidays mean to us? And this is an obvious, if you get into the article, gets into the background of how this became promoted and just basically adopted throughout. Like, why is there a tree in the White House? Queen Victoria puts a tree indoors. That's like the first move. And so why in the English-speaking world did this become promoted? I don't know if those questions are really answered, but how it unfolds, and then it's adopted and becomes a national holiday before there's really a tradition involved. And so the question is, why? Why do they want us paying our attention? A common theme that we have on our show and in our discussions to what's going on at this point. And I'll just conclude my opening remarks by saying, personally, I kind of resent it when the holidays run around and everyone's changing their behavior. They're getting a little bit edgy about it. Some people look forward to it with anticipation. I look forward to it as like, man, just like, let's just get this over with. I feel like I'm on the wall with the firing squad ahead of me, and I'm just like, just shoot me now, like Bugs Bunny, and let's get this over with, because I hate the interruptions. I've been a freelance worker for many years. Clients just don't want to commit to anything. Nobody wants to budget for anything. Nobody wants to budget time. Everyone's away. Nothing gets done for like 2 months. And there's been holiday creep for the last several decades in my life. And you see people referring to it like Black Friday is the next thing after. It really starts with Halloween. And it's like after Halloween is over, it's like it's Christmas time. It's the holidays. And so I think one thing that we see is this backlash among people that maybe they want to get back to the Christ part of Christmas, and they make an effort to say Merry Christmas around that time because people say Happy Holidays. It's kind of a misdirection. It's a misguided concept when you get into the actual origins of it. And I don't think we'll really expose any more of those origins. Read the articles, subscribe to Agent 131711's work on Substack. It's well worth it. And he's got a whole lot more that he's uncovering on a almost daily basis. I don't know how he does it, but check it out. It's cool.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with that comment about misdirection, I think about anyone who's really studied or looked deeper into the potential birth date of Christ knows that it wasn't December 25th. And I think that was his birth and the actual holiday were intertwined intentionally. And I'll get more into those thoughts here in a minute. But I think that, like so many other things, the powers that be want to use inversion to put a stain on anything that's related to Christ or the Word or the truth. And I don't know whether he was born in, some people speculate April 1st, and that would make sense that they created a holiday called April Fool's Day as another form of inversion. Some people have posited 9/11 or September the 11th, and that would just show you the long game of what happened in 2001. I don't really know, but I'm fairly certain it wasn't December 25th, and I feel like that holiday, and you referenced the pagan traditions that led to where we are today, but that holiday, I think, is also there to put a tarnish on anything related to God and turn one more mechanism for turning people towards consumerism, towards hedonistic behavior, towards gluttony, towards everything that goes along with the holiday, and really just turn everyone further into a materialistic mindset. It's very much like I've said before, that you had that unholy trinity that came out in the mid to late 1800s of evolution, heliocentricity, dinosaurs, all of that, and they all pointed in the same direction of meaningless and materialistic existence. And I think the holidays are no different in that sense. And I think one of the things you and I had talked about off air about addressing is, what did it or what does it mean to us? And I remember as a kid, the biggest thing for me was the materialistic part. It was, I get to pick something out of the Sears catalog, and I know I'm showing my age there, but I remember looking at toys and stuff in the Sears catalog and going, ooh, I want this, ooh, I want that. And it was like a countdown of days till you finally got one or more of those things that you were asking for. The significance of the holiday beyond that was just, oh, we get together, family, and eat a lot of food. But again, it points all in the same direction. And years after being a kid and realizing that toys just kind of got boring and there was less and less to look forward to, in many ways it did become a meaningless holiday. And I think that's a lot by design. And I think that's where you see a lot of depression during the holidays. You see a lot of overconsumption, rampant alcoholism, people getting on edge because they feel pressured to be involved in the mass consumerism. Like, it's not a good time. And again, I think that's all by design, by the controllers and the way that they like to invert things. And I'll just finish my opening comments too by saying, I don't think it's an accident that so-called Santa Claus, or as we may end up calling this episode, Satan Claus, I don't think it's an accident that his character was ultimately put in the North Pole, because number one, for those who tuned in last week when we were talking to David Weiss, we know we live on some type of plane, and the true North is, well, we didn't really cover this in that conversation, but those who've dug deeply into it know that there are 4 islands, and in the center of that is Mount Meru or Rupes Nigra, big magnetic mountain. All that being said, some speculate that's where Eden actually started. Some think that's where the Camp of Saints could be living today, if you're on my side of thinking that the millennial reign already happened. All that is to say that if the real origins of life and or the saints or whatever could be in the North Pole that none of us are allowed to go see or explore in any way, wouldn't it just be one more form of inversion that they put this basically devil-like character hanging out in the North, where there's actually probably a lot of truth and life, and who knows what's really going on up there, that could even be beneath the actual throne of God, and that's where we get the aurora borealis coming, like seeping out from. I mean, there's so much I think that's possible that we just don't know that's in the North. But I think that they intentionally put this Santa Claus character there to make it sound mythical, and also that there's nothing there but snow and ice and reindeer. And then once more, just to put whatever is in the North Pole into some materialistic, to put it through some sort of materialistic lens. And I think all this is by design. And I'll just let you chew on that for a minute and add some thoughts there.
Yeah, definitely important points. And I'm completely on top of the timeline, but I think there's a bit of dovetailing between the origins of the promotion of when it really got a little bit of momentum of Christmas and the dinosaur, those myths and the promotion of dinosaurs at the same time. So maybe it's a sleight of hand when it comes down to it. It's like, look, if there's nothing there, don't look there, and go dig in your backyard because there's some really interesting bones and fossils in there, and we're gonna come up with a bunch of really cool stories. So I'd have to go back and look at that timeline, but I think they're pretty closely paralleled. Would you know offhand? Especially that you're more on top of the dinosaur mythology than I am.
I'll just say that that's something that bears further research. I don't know how those dates overlap, but I mean, you also have to realize too that the controllers play a long game. So, they spun off the initial series of new mythology that we're living on a spinning ball hurling through space, and that dinosaurs were here millions of years ago and we all evolved from chimps. That was enough of an opening act that they could let that play out in the new industrialization of everything, that they could slowly creep in these stories and these holiday traditions to further get us down that trajectory of materialism. So I don't think it's necessary that those things had perfect overlap, but I think they're all part of the same plan. And I just think we've seen throughout throughout time the evidence of planning for major events. And who knows? I mean, maybe in the mid to late 1800s, post reset and all that, the controllers had this grand vision of different ways that they would degrade society and degrade our moral fabric, and that could have been part of it then. But I don't think they necessarily had to come out at the same time, and I don't think that's really the point of what we're discussing here today anyway.
Yeah, I just think that there were moves afoot to get people directed towards evolution and materialism, and they happen to dovetail in their purpose of getting everyone to pay their attention and focus on those things. And the timeline kind of rings a bell, so I'll stand corrected if that's the case, but I believe it really is kind of 1830s, 40s for Christmas, and same for when the dinosaur craze really picked up some momentum. So it just happened to pop into my head about that. But just speaking of Christmas becoming really a commercial thing, I think that's when a lot of people, when you have a conversation about Christmas and people's reflections on it and their memories from their youth, their childhood, a lot of people will indicate, they'll just say, yeah, it used to be so magical and wonderful, and then now it's just there's a lot of angst and there's a lot of consumerism involved, and it's been spoiled. It doesn't mean the same thing anymore to me. A lot of people say, I'm over Christmas. I can't do it anymore. And I've noticed, living abroad for many decades, as an observer in another society, and this is something interesting that I found in Agent 131711's series, is that the promotion of Christmas really was almost just two-pronged in the UK and the United States. And growing up, I always thought, well, we have O Tannenbaum, it's a German word. There's got to be like German traditions and maybe even figures that Santa is based on. And then maybe even something tied into like Norse mythology or something because he's in the North Pole, right? Well, based on what he is uncovering, it was really just kind of like a two-pronged thing in the English-speaking world, and then it took off. So I noticed, living abroad, really sensed that there was no spiritual element to the adoption of Christmas and the promotion of Christmas. It's a 100% shopping holiday. The department stores and different conglomerates of Western origin and investment just started promoting it. Like, now's a good time to do a lot of shopping, and then out come the Grinch colors, and people started adopting it, and they adopted Halloween around the same time abroad in Asia where I lived. So that's something that I noticed and was part of what put that extra bit of distaste in my mouth, observing what was going on, because I was just like, there's no tradition here. There's no family gatherings. They have holidays for that. This is purely a commercial thing.
Yeah, and to not as extreme of an example, but certainly Thanksgiving also has its questionable origins, and I don't believe for a second that there was some big feast between Quakers or Pilgrims or whoever in Indians, and I think that's just more mythology that we were given in public indoctrination centers. I don't think there's very much validity to any of that story, but yet it's one more excuse for everyone to get together and eat far too much and over and indulge in every way possible. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, that you've got Thanksgiving where people overindulge, you have Christmas, everyone overindulges, and then the so-called flu season happens right afterwards. I wonder why, right? People are eating way too much, they're consuming a bunch of sugar and alcohol, and then suddenly their body goes into shock and they get the flu. And of course, as we discussed in the past, there's the cult of pharmakia that's there to solve their problem for them. I think all these things are by design, and they're easy traps that most people willingly fall into because it's just tradition. And I even think about where in the heck did we even come up with this idea that there's football on Thanksgiving Day, and it always happens out of two places. Agent will appreciate one of them being in Detroit and the other one being in Dallas. Like, where did that even start? How did that become a thing? How are half the things that were said we're supposed to do, how did those become things? And it's just like so many other narratives that gets pushed on us, we just accept them and add them to our lexicon and to our behavior. And there's actually no reason for them, but we just accept them as social norms and move on. And in fact, one point that I thought was really important that Agent put in his first article was they created these characters like Ebenezer Scrooge to show the example of someone you don't want to be who doesn't participate in Christmas, because that's the worst possible human being, and so you have to participate in the Christmas
Don't be a Scrooge,
spirit.
you're going to get a lump of coal.
I think it's a brilliant scheme, actually, and I haven't looked up when elections started on November, but I do think that why not, with all the other theater and ways that we can be distracted, why not throw that in the mix of end of year activities? But I'll leave it there and let you comment further.
Well, I take exception to your assertion that the Pilgrims and the Indians didn't gather together. I mean, I was in the school play, right? I was an important pilgrim. So, I mean, how dare you? That's an important part of my memory from second grade. So it had to have been real, because it's a real memory. Yeah, but
because your teacher told you about it and you read it in a book.
Yeah, we took out it was construction paper and made pilgrim belts and orange looking turkeys, with like Trump skin, Trump colored complexions. It was really important. And I doubled as a lighting guy. So I was like playing two roles there, right? A stagehand and a pilgrim. So yeah, that's an important part of my formative years. And how dare you? But it's interesting how, for me, and probably you, I also noticed the promotion of Christmas. Just think back to like the bombardment of people, TV watchers, in the maybe what people could point to as the heyday, 3 channels, terrestrial TV, way before cable, and all the Christmas specials that were introduced from the probably around the time of the fake moon stuff, mid 60s all the way through maybe early 80s is when I was paying attention, dating myself there. But, everyone would have their favorite Christmas special. There was the Burl Ives Christmas special. There was the Rudolph, the Red-Nosed Reindeer one, where you had the Island of Misfit Toys, and all you had the Abominable Snowman. Was he in that one? I think he was in the one with the Island of Misfit Toys and that cute little elf. And yeah, that was just mass promotion through the media when that was all that was on TV for that particular period. So I don't know what your memories of those particular shows are. Maybe you had your favorite. I think there was one that was also the Rudolph story, which is interesting because Rudolph was not one of the original reindeers in that original poem, right?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I really had a favorite Christmas movie or special. In our house growing up, we generally made it a point to try to watch It's a Wonderful Life, and that one, I guess is one of the classics. But that being said, even as a kid, I'd see them and think that they were kind of cheesy and just not something interesting to me. But as you were talking about the big three channels before the advent of cable, it made me think. I had this image in my head, and it was probably accurate by and large for at least the U.S., that all these people who ate and drank too much all day long, watching these specials, falling asleep on their couches and sofas, and then at the very end of the night, the national anthem with its subliminal messaging, getting them into the prescribed state of mind before they get up the next day and start it all over.
Yeah, that's definitely something unique to a generation or two of people that watch TV. And especially when that static came on, you had to be aware of poltergeists coming through the TV as well. More pop culture reference, and actually a very sad story if you get into the making of Poltergeist and what happened to poor Heather. But not to get sidetracked on that. Yeah, it's all tied up. There's definitely a concerted commercial push and a push to create culture. So if you look at the mechanisms through which Christmas the seeds were laid, there's even self-referential clues or aspects that Agent also touches upon, where they kind of implanted false memories. They said, well, this is the tradition, and there wasn't any there. And because people were starting, we can probably connect this to public schooling, the introduction of the Prussian school system that John Taylor Gatto describes very well, and increase in literacy. Well, what can you do when people can read? Well, if you're trying to control things, you're also going to try to push certain beliefs and certain things as information and implant those ideas and cultures among society. And so what do? You introduce a classic Christmas story by one of the great novelists of all time, Dickens, right? And as people are getting more literate, that's what they're probably going to gift each other that book, in fact, over the Christmas season. So it's an interesting study in the anatomy of cultural creation, in a sense.
Yeah, great point. And just thinking about where culture creation went after that point with the advent of cable TV and just the explosion of channels, and thinking about when MTV came online and how much symbolism, Masonic symbolism they were pushing back then that so many of us missed, also reinforcing past psyops like the moon landing was part of the initial illustrations that were shown, and just them trying to convey how cutting edge and hip they were, but actually it was just more of, you live in a spinning ball in the space vacuum, and we went to the moon and conquered it and proved it to you. I mean, that's just one small example, but I brought up the signing off of the channels back when it was just the big three, and you can go find videos. Spacebusters did a special about this a few years back, but you can slow things down and see it easily if you're paying attention. But now and especially in our digital age, so much of that subliminal messaging goes straight past our conscious mind and into our subconscious. And the more they've been able to advance that technology, the more we've seen. I don't think any of these are by accident. First it was Blockbuster, then it was Netflix, and then it was streaming everything. But there's no lack of options for you, or channels, and I say that word intentionally, to channel the prescribed set of messages into your mind for you to internalize and then act upon in some way, consciously or subconsciously. And when you think about it and you take a step back, holidays, TV, all of that kind of link and lead to the same end result. It's, as you say, it's culture creation, it's creating norms, it's creating a desire or demand for materialistic things. I can't really think of too many Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever specials that are about doing things that are good for you and better for society and develop you spiritually. I don't think those generally exist. So there's 100 subgenres of ways to degrade yourself, but I think they're all part of a more elaborate and multi-layered plan to get people to waste time, waste energy, waste resources, and ultimately destroy themselves.
Thinking back to our episode with Michael Jaguar, I remember he posed the question, can you think of any utopian stories rather than dystopian? And I said, can't. And he goes, yeah, because they ain't any. And yeah, there are no stories about people getting together over the winter and building a pole barn or something, and homesteading for the getting prepared for the winter. It's always like who's gonna propose to the girlfriend over the Christmas break or whatever, just sitcom type drama. That level is going on in this small town, and when everyone's together because everyone's watching, and it's like you said, it's just the same thing. It's just pointing everyone towards, taking some time off, but then it really focuses everything on the material aspects. And so my question is just how do you deal with that? What do you do when people are really attached to just the holiday season in general? They love the decorations. They love the music. I can't deal with the music, man. I don't like any of those. Unfortunately, I'm a Scrooge in that sense. It's funny getting to Agent's work. A lot of those jingles, the songs that became Christmas songs, were written by Jewish songwriters. Sammy Kahn would be an example, I believe, famous composer of popular songs. And not that there's anything wrong with Jewish songwriters. It's just, what are they doing if Christmas is all about Christ and celebrating him and his birth, and they don't celebrate Christmas? How do they get involved in that? Are they really into it? It's the most wonderful time of the year. They're writing a script for people, and so that's just one of the aspects of Christmas that I think on on a real visceral level just kind of annoys me. I'm just irked by Christmas in general, having repatriated from abroad where I saw just the raw commercial aspects and the material aspects of it adopted by a country that had no tradition of it at all. And so you remove the traditions, and I think we've seen the erosion of the traditions in our own country, and it's what's left is an alienating feeling for a lot of people. But I go back, and one question in my mind is, I grew up going to Catholic church on Christmas Eve. That was important. My question is, how did that even get adopted by the establishment, the churches as well? Like, how do you go from something that has nothing to do with what your faith celebrates and recognizes, and then maybe it was the 501c3 aspect. I don't know. National holiday. Okay, well, we're a tax exempt organization. We're just going to play along with the government. That would be something that I would like to look into at some point.
Yeah, I, in general, don't believe in coincidences, nor do I believe that was a coincidence. And yeah, there's a lot to say about 501c religious organizations in general, and that could be its own episode, so I won't go too deeply down that rabbit hole. But you're exactly right. I mean, these are the same institutions that told people to put face diapers on and roll up their sleeves in 2020 and said that they were doing God's work when they did. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that they participated in the sham that was Saturnalia with a different name. And one thing that I was just thinking about too is I just had a conversation earlier today with a colleague who we're really talking about developing good habits and thinking about, and much of this I think you could also look at one of the latest books I'm reading that I highly recommend no matter what field you're in, called The Gap and the Gain. And it's really easy to be in the gap where you're comparing yourself against others or other people's standards versus the gain where you're really looking at how much better than yesterday did you do, how are you progressing. And we were just talking along those general lines about having good habits every day and thinking about your time horizon beyond just today or this week, that you're in a long game and you have good habits every single day. And the reason I bring this all up is with the time that people do have off around the holidays at the end of the year, what are we encouraged to do? Waste time in front of a TV, eat too much, drink too much, everything too much, spend a bunch of money, get into debt, make yourself sick, and then start the whole cycle over in January and be part of the system until you finally get a few days off to yourself, and then eat too much, drink too much, get in front of the TV. I mean, it's really such a waste of people's energy and just thinking what they could be doing with that time that they do have off. And instead it's like, how much overconsumption can you participate in before it destroys you?
Yeah, and then you recover just in time to do it all over again during the Super Bowl, right? On Super Bowl Sunday. I think we mentioned that.
Also by design.
When we were just starting out one of our earlier episodes, it was like around the time of the Super Bowl, and we were joking about, well, who are you going to get together with and watch it? Because it's just what people do in America, right? And we're getting together with family over Thanksgiving this year, and it's not to my taste normally, but yeah, it's just, they've even ruined Thanksgiving for me in a lot of ways because the travel is just, it's gotten so difficult, and I think it's not really in the boundaries of today's show, but just making travel an ordeal, the harassment, the scheduling snafus, and of course weather does exist, and I've encountered some issues getting back east for for certain occasions during the winter, and that had nothing to do with any deliberate Agenda 2030 type stuff making us not want to fly. But it's even Thanksgiving has become a pain in the butt. And so anyway, there's been chatter among the family about maybe some activities we're going to do, and who's going to get the turkey, and then who's going to prepare the turkey. And then someone chimes in and says, well, we really need to finish by, I think it's 4 p.m. because such and such brother-in-law, to me, has got to watch whoever's playing the other foe. That I guess he's a alumni of whatever team. Let's just say Michigan State, even though I don't know. But go Wolverines! We got to finish dinner by 4 so that he can watch the football game. So it's just kind of crazy how things have been reoriented based on very passive activity and very active overconsumption.
Here. Yeah. I personally don't see. I mean, I know it's a time for people to come together and to celebrate on some level, and I don't want to take that away from anyone, but I just don't see why we have to participate the way we do. And I think there's so much better use of our time and resources that we could be doing otherwise. I mean, you brought up the example of pole barn is just, a community activity, whatever it is. What could we be doing? I will tip my hat to someone I know locally here. He and his wife go around the holidays and they go to homeless shelters and help feed people. Now that's actually using your time well and serving others. And I think that's what we should be striving to. How can we make the world a better place versus how much gluttony and overconsumption can we participate in?
Yeah, great points. And getting to a theme that we bring up frequently here, essentially, when these things reach your consciousness and you start feeling like you don't want to participate, well, the onus is on you to do something about it. Say something to your family, say something wherever you have a voice, and change your behavior. If you don't feel like buying gifts for everybody in your family and extended family because, number one, it's something you really don't want to spend money on, or you just take exception to having that designated as something you need to do, then maybe give gifts at a different time in the year. Just go all out on their birthday. Just say, I'm not really that into Christmas. I feel like I've been directed towards this particular kind of conduct. And how about we just really gather for a true Thanksgiving and give thanks for what we have and the people in our lives. And I think people might be really receptive to that. I didn't want to come off as a total Scrooge, like you mentioned today, but yeah, there's opportunity in everything. Every time our awareness is raised about something, we have the opportunity to do something about it and change our behavior. And yeah, I think that adds up at some point. We can impact other people.
And you bring up a really good point that giving gifts and having Thanksgiving for the things you have is something you can do every day. You don't have to wait for some designated day. You can do nice things for people all the time. You don't have to wait until December. And I think that point is missed by a lot of people. Many people can be on the rat race trying to climb over someone else at someone else's expense. But by Christmas time, you pull out the credit card and buy a bunch of gifts and all is forgiven, right? I mean, that's definitely the world we live in now. So I would say, just in wrapping up this particular episode and discussion, it's let's take back the holiday and make it a year-long thing. Let's not participate in overconsumption. Let's figure out how to give and serve others on a regular basis. So that would be my call to action.
Mine too. I think we should practice gratitude. It sounds kind of cliche, and there's tons of books on morning gratitude or whatever it is, journaling, being and writing down what you're grateful for, and they're legit. It's really something. It's a good practice to just take a moment and recognize what you're grateful for, because gratitude, what's the opposite? Maybe fear. Fear erases a lot of proactive behaviors. It makes people stupid, as we saw in 2020, and made somebody very close to me who was a literal genius stupid, out of fear, and caused him to do stupid things, and that ended up being harmful to his health. And so, yeah, the opposite to me of fear is not necessarily like optimism or looking forward to something. It's just being in a good place, centered and grateful for the life that we have and the people and everything that we do have, and we can build on that. So, yeah, let's be grateful and enjoy what we can of this season. And I'm definitely grateful for Agent 131711's work, the Substack, and the Shadow Band library that he's building with Medicine Girl. And we're very happy and grateful for our inclusion in the Shadow Band library. I know that's something we're really proud about and enjoy being part of that sphere.
I'll just add to, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that we decided to do this podcast, and grateful for the listeners who've started paying attention and adding comments and, just paying their attention to these weekly conversations, and, just share with others, add comments, send us an email. We want this to be our own little community, and the more the merrier. So until that point, I would say stay tuned. Send us any suggestions about what you'd like us to cover and people you'd like us to speak to. And as we saw just last week, sometimes someone meets someone and it can turn into a conversation no one expected. So feel free to make those connections as well. We're welcome to most guests. Until then, see you next week.